So as I was saying, we stopped off before we finished just before this slide the other time, and this just before this was about Freud's account of personality. Should you believe in Freudian approach? Now, we shouldn't say that, no, I totally reject that person. Reason being that some of his contributions are valid, okay? Even though it was more like speculative. Remember, he proposed a lot of things without providing any evidence. He didn't, evidence can come from two angles. One, you literally collect it from real life population. You make observations from real life population. This is going to be tough because we can't observe everyone at the same time. And we can't observe everyone, maybe not at the same time. We also can't observe everyone across a prolonged period of time. So sometimes, right, we make do with a representative sample. So we draw from the population. For example, in Singapore, what is representative, right? In Singapore, it would be the minimum you want to make sure it tallies would be the racial proportion. So we know by population census that Singapore has about 75% Chinese, about 7% Indian. Actually, I think now dropped to about 6. Okay, and then the 20 what? 20, about 20%, 21% will be Malays, and then finally the remaining one will be all the other races. Now, of course, race is an outdated concept, but the idea is that some of the things, all right, are like cultural roots, right? It's imparted from within only that community group. So if you want to draw a sample of, let's say, 1,000 people instead of observing 5.5 million, you want that 1,000 people to be made up of like maybe say 750 Chinese, 200 Malays, and then 60 will be Indians, something like that. So it's proportional to the population. So this is what we call representativeness. Certain important or key features, it matches the bigger group. But Freud didn't do any of this. He neither looked at population nor sample. Okay, the only thing he reported were the patients that he observed, because he had to treat them. All right, but his patient group happened to be a very skewed population, meaning what? They are not the same as normal people. They are all very rich people. I mean, in the past, 100-200 years ago, how many people got money to always go and see doctor? All right, most of them have to work in factories or are peasants. So whatever he said is dubious. Then from there, the way he projected personality was also very weird, and he had a very strong emphasis on sexual nature of humans. So it's difficult to believe him, and other people like humanistic approach literally developed theories to counter what Freud proposed. So to the humanistic people, okay, from now and the next one, right, I will zoom past very quickly, because even though they are more substantial than Freud, it was not really that great. And they didn't really account for personality, which I will explain shortly. So you don't mind the speed, okay? All right, just don't mind the speed. So for Carl Rogers, he suggested that humans are born good. Unlike Freud, Freud's basis is that humans are full of conflict, okay? Just remember this. Freud made an assumption that all humans are born with conflict. Not that you like to fight with another person kind of conflict, but within yourself, you are never sure of your desire. You cannot even say that you have consistent needs. So you are constantly struggling. But Carl Rogers and a bunch of humanistic scientists rejected the idea that we are full of conflict. Instead, they suggested that humans are born good, kind, and basically they just want to be great. The only reason why people have problems is that they face with life setbacks. So, but after describing this, right, Carl Rogers came up with the idea of personality, which is something that looks like this. He said that there is something called ideal self and your real self. And they are like these two, represented by these two circles. Sometimes they overlap, but if your ideal is very difficult, very far away, your goals are like difficult to reach, then the two sets of features, what you desire and what you really are, they don't match. Now, if this happens, you will be under severe amount of stress. Otherwise, you are fine. You are just striving forward. But you think about it, this idea of congruence and incongruence in human nature, how does it tell us about personality? Does it really explain that we have certain characteristics that influence the way we think, the way we feel, the way we do things? Do you think so? Like nowadays, people are very familiar with things such as what introversion and extraversion, right? So Carl Rogers' idea of, okay, so sometimes we are under stress, sometimes we are not. It depends on how close we are to our desire. Does this tell us whether we will be introverted or extroverted? Yeah, not really, right? So all Carl Rogers did was that he described a general observation about humans, like why we end up being stressed. And it's only just one type of reason why we end up being stressed. It doesn't even really explain personality. It doesn't completely explain why some humans are more stressed out than the others, right? So not very useful. Although it was useful only in their therapy work. So very often they will try to figure out, ask the person childhood details, and see whether the desire and the actual thing match. Okay, so it's not very helpful. All right, and of course, Carl Rogers proposed very strongly his idea of unconditional positive regard, which said that if we give people a lot of validation and acknowledgement, even when they are not asking for it, people will become good. This is just an assumption. There is no evidence of this. But why it works in therapy is because a lot of people who see Carl Rogers, they are people who are rejected by others. So obviously, if you give them some acknowledgement, some validation, right, it's going to make them feel good. So it will alleviate some of their mood issues. All right. So it wasn't really due to personality. Now, so this part, although there is evidence of unconditional positive regard working, we don't really subscribe to the idea that humans are born good. Okay? So some other people who survived the cognitive revolution, they decided that we still need behaviorism, but we need to have more comprehensive explanatory type. It's not like the hard-handed way where John Watson and Skinner pushed everyone around. So this was filled by people like Albert Bandura. So another bunch of theorists decided to propose the idea of personality. This bunch of people will focus on learning principles. Not that they are behaviorists, but then they have learned from the behaviorists' extensive research that people do form some of their principles in life based on what they have learned. So that sounds like a good start because it's true. And there is evidence to support that. So we are looking at this bunch of people. Like, show you the names first. Here, people like Bandura, Michel, okay? All right, what did they say? So go back to some of the things. Now, before I move on, so I said this bunch of people, they have lots of research data. They took from all the things that, the useful things that Skinner, Watson, they all produced, right? And then there's also cognitive research, which they didn't cast out. So they looked at it and then they realized that, one of those things that that influence people's decision-making, people's feelings, well, that could be the gender. All right, so they talk about that. And because they focus on learning, they feel that, culturally, some of the stuff are learned culturally, and this will influence the way people think. Furthermore, Bandura himself demonstrated that humans don't always learn through receiving rewards. So not necessarily reinforcement. if you recall last week or last week, we talked about Bandura. One of his contribution was that children will imitate whatever they have watched. So he also put that in and suggested that there's a lot of imitation. So all these things are part and parcel of the learning that leads to formation of personality. But with this talk, right, it only tells us that the one avenue of why you have a personality is because you learned it. Does that explain why the whatever is your personality, right? So does it explain why your personality make you decide in a certain way but not another way? Like for example, maybe someone treasures this idea called filial piety a lot. Then you ask the person, how come you are so filial? What do you think the person will answer? Sometimes people feel shy. So in order to be humble, they might say, oh, because I was taught this way, my parents. So that explains where it came from. But does that tell us how filial this person is compared to another person? Not necessarily. You still have to have some form of measurement, right? And moreover, this topic called, or this idea called filial piety is expressed differently in different cultures, right? Like in local setting, most of our adults can be very old, but still living with parents. And it's considered because they want to take care of the parents. That's a form of filial piety. But in another culture, they will judge this behavior as very parasitic. So despite the fact that you live with your parents until you are very old of age and you are taking care of your parents, but if you do this in, let's say, a city like New York, they will think that you are living off your parents. Because they have a different culture. They believe in children reaching 18 to about 21 years old, you should try to show more independence. So whatever Bandura they all proposed, not so great after all. It's still lacking in many ways. For one, it doesn't explain how the influence will eventually be. Although they did propose a few good ideas, like Bandura said that some humans, they tend not to give up. They tend not to give up. They will persist in trying to figure out, like, okay, what's the difficulty? What's the problem? All right, do I have a solution to doing things? And they will persist and they are determined. They call this perseverance. Now, Bandura didn't like the idea that, these are very big words, saying people that, oh, this person is full of willpower, just because someone showed that he didn't give up. All right? But what is willpower? This is something we ever since the 50s, we want to throw away. So psychologists don't actually talk about willpower. Right? Because there are too many ways where this so-called willpower can exhibit. And so if you think about it, right, consider this scenario. So there's this gentleman who will somehow say that no, I shouldn't give up on my patients. And then so as a nurse, he would work in the emergency respiratory ward. All right, and with all the COVID spreading, so he has no fear. Then again, right, but if you look at this person, maybe what happened is when he's let's say he has to burn midnight oil because he needs to study for his nursing degree. But starting up to 10 p.m., he would say, oh, I cannot take it anymore, I need to go to sleep. That sounds like no willpower, right? So does the person actually have willpower? So then we try to say, oh no, because he's courageous. That's why he dared to go into all these kind of dangerous wards. But he's just brave. Bravery is not part of sleep. But if you think about it, right, when you ignore the assignment deadline, does that require a bit of bravery? I mean, it's stupidity too, but still got a bit of bravery, right? So this thing called willpower is so great that we don't really like it. There are many different situations that are like, the person, you say that, okay, this person has willpower, then suddenly in another situation, no willpower. But if it's some relatively permanent characteristics, it shouldn't change. Not like suddenly changing from one end to the other end. So Bandura decided to look at it, look at the components. And one of the components, or not all, was this idea called whether people have self-efficacy. The so-called, this is referring to the belief that they will always be able to find some solutions to problem. So they don't know the actual solution. They just have this strong belief that I think I can find a solution. This is different from optimism, okay? Optimism is you have this strong belief that you will reach your goal. But a person with self-efficacy doesn't mean that they believe they will reach the goal. They just believe they will come up with a useful solution. Now then people are confused. How come? I thought got a solution means got goals. At least can achieve goals. Not necessary. Suppose your goal is to become, okay, let's make it simple. Let's make it very materialistic. All right. Suppose your goal is to make $1 million by the time you turn 25. And let's say you just graduated from school. Now, so you want to, so your idea is I want to set up a successful business and I want to hit like the company has $1 million in reserve after paying off everything. Now, in the end, right, you have a company and people are all looking up to you and you know you have secured future projects, but your company has not reached $1 million. So have you reached your goal? Not really. But you know that you will get there, right? And your solution has worked. That's why your company is successful and it's heading towards the correct direction. So optimism is simply the feeling that we know that by the end of the set deadline, we will reach the goal. But self-efficacy doesn't talk so much about the goals. It is just saying that will you be able to come up with a good solution? So if you have a good solution, you may not reach your goal, but you might still be pretty good. Okay?
Isn't it the same as motivation?
Motivation talks about this. So motivation is like this big thing which is made up by a lot of things. Self-efficacy is one of them. So when a person is filled with high levels of self-efficacy, they are probably more motivated. When a person has optimism, they are also motivated, but it could be false optimism, so false motivation. Why? There are a lot of people out there who tell you, no problem, I sure can reach on, but actually they have no idea, right? So Bandura also didn't like that. Right? So to answer the question, Bandura didn't like that, so he thought maybe we should focus on solution rather than the end goal, because end goal will also include people who propose false optimism and false motivation. Okay? Now, but ultimately, right, all this talk about self-efficacy, and then people who talk about, all right, like Michelle, they talk about, okay, so yeah, whether people are stable or not, it's very broad. It doesn't talk specifically about a characteristic, because there are actually many things that make up your self-efficacy. For example, past experience, past achievements. Some people feel that they are more likely to figure out a useful solution because maybe out of 10 projects they took on last time, they accomplished 8. So they are filled with more confidence, saying that, I think I can. But you notice there are some people who are resilient. They failed many times, but they never give up because they still believe that they will come up with the correct solution eventually. So we don't like this kind of gray area, because if you look at introversion versus extroversion, for example, it's very clear-cut because they have specific ways of describing these people. You think about it, would an extroverted person be very quiet, non-participative in activities? What's your understanding of extroversion? If I tell you there's someone who's extroverted, will they like hide in a corner, don't want to talk much? Yeah, it's not. They have only one specific behavior that they will exhibit, which is they are usually very interactive, sometimes called talkative, and they cannot stay still. They have to be active. Part of the reason is because it's biologically this way. All right, some people have tried to explain, and one of those so there are many reasons behind this. One of the reasons is because an extroverted person, the brain activity level is actually lower than average. So in order that they don't succumb into depression or all this, right, they take on a lot more activities to keep themselves stimulated. So in this case, they are always active. Because if they go too low, it's an uncomfortable feeling of depression setting in. So you can't run away from this. There's no gray area one. If you are born like that, you're born like that. All right? But self-efficacy depends. Why is it that some people are resilient, some people are not? Then you have to talk about a lot more things. So people are not comfortable with trying to rope in ideas such as self-efficacy into personality because there are too many components making it up. Which is what this is about. Ultimately, right, in the study of human behavior, people, the so-called experts, right, they opted to consider personality as something, as an idea or concept, right, that is made up of by very clear-cut characteristics. Is it 100% clear-cut? I don't think so. But when you say, right, it's like cross-culturally, people understand. And there are such things. So for example, about 30 years ago, they looked at certain characteristics that are very similar to back then, right, what was established as personality. Like this idea called compassion. Apparently, they interviewed participants from at least 40 over countries, and they realized that every country, the people understood compassion the same way. There is an element of self-sacrifice, and the person is caring and kind, all right, and they are willing to help. So you go to any culture, even if your language is different, they still have notions of compassion. So that's what we are looking for. We are looking for certain characteristics, right, that are universal. And it's not because of many components, so it's gray. It's standard, it describes a particular type of inclination to behave, and that is personality. So this will link back to previously what you know as the definition of personality, a set of relatively permanent characteristics. All right. So they are stable over time. They across culture, across situations, person will still behave in that particular way, and you don't easily change it. All right. It doesn't matter whether the person has learned it or is biologically inclined towards that way. No matter how it's formed, the person won't change it so easily once formed. All right. And then they went back, right? So now you need to understand, any field of knowledge doesn't just suddenly pop up at an exact date. So whilst around early 1950s, right? So late 1940s, early 1950s, people started to reject Freudian approach, talking about all his funny ways of personality. They also, around at that time, they started to reject the idea that we can categorize people according to horoscopes, according to zodiac signs, or according to some broad-based personality constructs. But the information for all this, right, all this so-called arsenal to reject the old ideas, didn't come during 1940s. It was already around since the 1920s. So somewhere in late 1920s, early 30s, there was this guy called Gordon Allport, and he already started to compile information about characteristics, human characteristics. Now he started off with using, I can't remember which dictionary, but he started with those kind of like Oxford dictionary, those powerful kind of dictionary. He looked through the dictionary, copying out every word that describes human behavior, or human thinking, or human feelings. So anything about human behavior. In the end, he got a lot of words, too many actually. So about, if I remember correctly, it was about either 40,000 or 60,000. Well, but that's silly. You can't develop a science of personality with 60,000 descriptions, right? That's too much. But if you, at that time, right, he took a look and he saw that, but some of the words are overlapping. For example, some words are like smart, intelligent, or they mean about the same thing. So he first swept away all those repetitive words. Of course, he didn't anyhow sweep away. He only retained those words that are more technical in nature. Like smart is more somewhat casual, colloquial type. Intelligence, people's understand, even if you're not expert, right, your understanding is this word talks about solving, problem solving ability. So Gordon Allport retained those. So he first removed repetitive words. Then he looked at whether words that remain, right, whether they are talking about feelings, they are talking about thinking, and eventually he thought that emotions are not personality. So he threw that out also. But he still ended up with a lot of words, about 6,000. So that's still no good. You can't have people studying 6,000 different characteristics. All right, that's too many. So, but then by then he was a bit old already. So he got to have some people take over. So his best effort was that it narrowed down the scope a lot. Subsequently, people followed the pathway that he had set. All right. So the foundation, and they followed some of the things that he described. He did by then identify certain things and talk about these three things. He said that any kind of characteristics about human person that will influence the way they behave, you can look at it as whether they are like very strong influence or they are consistently in the person's life but have a lesser influence. And he considered things such as what? Those things that are central to you, or they are like your core motivation. He called those cardinal traits. So things such as what? Such as compassion. Although he didn't regard compassion at the time. He used the word altruism. Okay. So something such as altruism was a cardinal trait. Now, one thing that was not so great about him, about Gordon Allport, was that because remember he did this started in I think 1924. So I can't exactly remember the date, but I think it's 1924. Now remember at that time, research methods has not been invented yet, as in modern day research methods. So the way he decided to do research, right, is something that is not very robust like today. What he did was he tried to understand things on hindsight, which is no good because on hindsight means you already experienced it, you could already become biased. So what he did was he looked for autobiography of people. So on the one hand, right, he selected out the words. At the same time, on his other spare time, he would be reading autobiographies, looking at whether people, the stories, the histories of people, whether it can fit those words. And he did find. So he drew up a list of all those famous people. Eventually, Mother Teresa would be like one of those, because Mother Teresa's very recognized behavior, and it has to be repeated all the time, was that she goes around saving orphans. All right, at least that's the impression she gives. So yeah, that means there's something fishy about it. Okay, but we are not going to criticize Mother Teresa. It's another topic. Okay. Yeah, there are certain ills that happen from her work too. But anyway, let's look at what the whole world's understanding of Mother Teresa, which is someone who is self-sacrificial, someone who is always saving others. Most people will understand this. So he said that, yeah, this actually ties in with what he has, as in Allport, right? He said that, yeah, this entire autobiography, the gist of it ties in with this word called. So what he did was he started to list down those things that happen all the time, and he said that, look, I have examples to support my work. So that was formed. So if you take a look, I'd like you to consider this. How will you distinguish between cardinal, central, and secondary traits? So in layman's term, something that is like your value system. It always influences the way you think and the way you feel. This typically will be considered by Gordon Allport as cardinal characteristics. Okay? So if you say someone is altruistic, we all have the same understanding that the person must be very kind and self-sacrificial. So if you say that, oh, the person has wisdom, then we all, no matter which culture you go to, they will have the idea that we are talking about someone who knows a lot of things factually, and also know how to do things, so has procedural kind of knowledge, and they tend to be not extreme figures, meaning they are willing to consider multiple solutions. So that's our idea of being wise, right? And you look at in the ancient past, all the descriptions of wise people are usually like that. They know a lot of things within their field and also how to do things. Plus, they don't usually suggest very extreme actions, right? So these are like cardinal traits. They are universally recognized. They influence people in Earth in one particular way only. So there are only a few cardinal traits. Sorry, offhand I cannot recall. I think he mentioned there are 12 cardinal traits. But it's okay, you're not gonna be tested on it. Then he said that there are some things, right, that will somehow you tend to use it often. So for example, maybe you are a compassionate person. You're altruistic, you're compassionate. So one of those characteristics that you might use would be kindness. But the problem is, they found that kindness is very gray because in some cultures, kindness is expressed in a different way, right? So, like if you look at China and India, they have a culture of not eating animals that helped with human labor, maybe for example cows. All right. But you go to another culture, you can be very nice to animals, you have lots of pets, but you will still slaughter them for food. So it's a bit gray now. So you consider all these things like altruism is cardinal, then the offshoots of it like kindness, that could be central. So the person often shows kindness, then that is a central trait. But this is not universally recognized. Okay? You go to another culture, the kindness can be expressed in a different way. And finally, your likes and dislikes, right? Because your likes and dislikes has a pattern also. Okay, what is your favorite food? What is your favorite food? I'm sure it's not
Chicken rice.
Chicken rice. So you find that if you ask, hey, let's go for lunch, she will usually suggest chicken rice. That's one thing. But does that mean she doesn't eat any other food? Not really, right? She will eat other food. Or do you?
Yes.
Okay. Just in case. Maybe that is your cardinal trait, no? Chicken rice. But another thing is this. If let's say, right, okay, suppose right, you are in office working, and then you cannot go for lunch because now you have an urgent task to finish. And your friend say, hey, I packed lunch for you. What you want? What are you likely to say? Chicken rice. It's her preference. This chicken rice doesn't determine anything much about her life, but it is always very automatic, somewhere floating in the top of her mind, ready to pop up one. So we are sometimes driven by these kind of things. Most of the time, these kind of characteristics are our likes and dislikes of things. So Allport said these are your secondary traits. Okay? Most of your so-called preferences, they are your secondary traits. That's why people know. They will call you, instead of calling the name, right, they may give you a nickname. So they say, hey, Miss Chicken Rice. So things like that come. No, don't worry, I'm not I'm not giving you that nickname. I'm just using it as an example. So you notice these kind of things get labeled onto us. People see a pattern about us, but we really don't mean anything. All right? As in nothing serious about it. That's why they are secondary traits. They allow another person to so-called to recognize you through a certain pattern. And she's probably not the only person who has a preference for chicken rice. I mean, I could ask anyone here who loves chicken rice also, raise your hand. Okay, we have another person, all right? I can't see the online people, all right? But I'm sure some of you will also start to click. Mr. Lam want me to click the raise hand button? You click, okay? So then you put all these people in, you find that, now we have a category of people. All right, these are something called the chicken rice lover. So now I think you understand. So cardinal traits are very core, very value system-based kind of things that will always be there. Your decision is basically revolving around all these values. Then there are certain characteristics, right, which is very tied into your so-called cardinal traits, but they are not always interpreted the same universally across the world. A person who's kind in one country may be seen as maybe not so kind in another country because the concept can be interpreted in a different way. All right, cardinal is universal. And you go anywhere in the world, you ask people about altruism, they will always tell you, oh, a person is kind and self-sacrificial. You're going to run away from these two things. But kindness is different. And finally, likes, dislikes, all these very fluid stuff, but able to allow another person to see some patterns out of you, that's the secondary traits, okay? All right, now, so put a star here. Like now you know something about personality characteristics. We have certain categories. But that was Allport since 1920s. All right, and after the 6,000 words, he couldn't continue anymore. He was too old. So somebody took over. Now then we fast forward history. Over the next 50, 60 years, there was a lot of refinement to the idea. They keep refining the list to make it more manageable. Only stopping because World War II disrupted the research. It didn't stop it, it's just that very little focus on it. But after World War II, you find that the world was trying to recover. And at that time, right, America was leading the world. And the American scientist has this notion that personality of a person should be studied, because if we know how to recognize people according to the patterns, we can also put them into different kinds of work. We can recommend what kinds of work is suitable for them. That will help with productivity. So that gave a boost to personality studies, eventually culminating in a few perspectives. The most common, most popular perspective is that was ironed in 1980. There was this huge symposium which had about 5,000 relevant experts gathered. Some of them, of course, are personality scientists or psychologists. They decided to consider 5 basic characteristics as something that is universal in everyone, and you can always measure how much, how little, and that after you measure, you will be able to know what is the pattern the person will show in specific to a particular behavior. So your so-called common understanding of introversion versus extraversion was born. This became one of those particular traits, all right, given the highlight during the symposium. So you take a look at this, also put a star there. So this is like something like all student psychologists and expert psychologists will know. So put a star there. I'd like you to read through them. This is sometimes known as the nickname, right? It's called the Big Five. So the Big Five traits of personality: openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Some people will ask, hey, what happened to introversion? The opposite end of the scale is just not listed, but it's understood that it's there. Like extraversion's opposite end is introversion. Okay? Then you ask, then what about openness? All right, openness, the opposite end's word is hardly used. It used to be like being conservative, but they find that the word is too gray, so they drop it in favor of describing it as whether you are high in openness or low in openness. All right. Okay, you finish through the list first. Look at each term and what it's actually talking about. Okay, more or less done. In other words, the line below that point, for example, let's jump to another one. Discipline, organization, dependable. So if someone is, if you let's say you have 2 friends, A and B, and then you want someone to help you, and you keep going to B, then right, your let's say your maybe say your family, either your spouse or your mom or dad asks you, why you always go to B for help? And then you start to say, because he's more reliable. That kind of thought, right? So when a person is dependable, the person shows structure in the way they go through life, they are more organized than others, that means they score high on conscientiousness. And literally, there is a scale to measure this. So by the time we hit 1980, there is this scale that is simply called NEO, which is the abbreviation of neuroticism, extroversion, and openness. Initially, they were only thinking of these three, but later expanded to 5. So this NEO personality inventory, measures these big 5. And when you use NEO to measure, all right, even though it's self-report, it is pretty accurate. All right, so depending on which version and which culture you go to, the NEO is good enough to be almost 80% accurate at identifying the person's personality traits and how much they are displaying with reference to the population. So suppose I did it right, and I score, let's give you a way to understand this. Let's say the score is from 0 to 100. So let's say I score 80. And then maybe, sorry, I still can't remember your name. Sorry? Jeremy. Then Jeremy scores 60 on, let's look at neuroticism, the last one. So in that case, right, I am usually a worrywart. I tend to be very nervous. I tend to be in anxiety more likely than him. And in fact, you can probably list it on a scale that if you measure everyone in the population and you put us out right from the least score to the highest score, I would be somewhere at the 80th percent mark of people. So there's only like 20% of the population worse off than me. So it's that specific. Okay? Whereas over at the other end, right, where the person is less worrisome would be Jeremy. All right? And then you look at him, or he's like, 20% away from me. So it's very, very specific. So it allows us to move people into various things, or at least we suggest to people, what are some things you have to look out for because you are more or less so compared to the others. Okay, a few points to note. Neuroticism is also another, and outside there's a typo. There should be a letter I in between C and S. Neuroticism is a bad word by today's standards. When it first came out several decades ago, it was okay. Freud was the guy who first used neuroticism to describe the tendency to be worrisome, to be anxiety prone, to succumb to depression. But over the years, we find that this is like very bad. It's very demeaning for a person to be stuck with this kind of label. So nowadays, we tend to use the word emotional stability. So if you score high in emotional stability, that means you must be low on neuroticism. So this is another one of those that has an opposite term. Extroversion has an opposite term called introversion. So neuroticism's opposite term is emotional stability.
Would you say that neuroticism is actually a negative way of...
Yeah, by today's standards, we see it as a negative word. So people don't like to be labeled as a neurotic person. In the past, it was okay. Freud happily just labeled, oh, you are a neurotic person. And these people, oh yes, I finally know who I am. And then they ask Freud for more advice and help. But nowadays, you're neurotic only, then wahoo, because they cannot accept the word. Okay, kidding, okay? But literally, people don't like to be labeled as neurotic. Now, all right, so the other thing I want to highlight is if you take a look, the abbreviation is OCEAN, ocean. So it helps people to remember it. And so when people ask you, hey, what's the big 5? Please don't start telling people, oh, I think it's a Pacific Ocean. Okay? All right. So this abbreviation is really to help you remember the big 5. But so don't give the wrong kind of ocean, all right?
So if a person have a few or
yeah, you have all.
Yeah.
You have all.
It's just that
It's just how much.
How much.
Okay.
And how do they do this new skill testing?
How? They actually have what we call questionnaire. All right. Then the questionnaire will describe various scenarios, and then sometimes they ask generic questions like, do you generally when you are troubled, do you generally talk to someone or not? So all the questions are about some scenarios or some actions that you probably would have taken, and then you circle. So then there's I can't remember whether it's 1 to 5 or 1 to 7. So and of course they jumble up the questions. So ultimately, right, they will pick out questions that represent, let's say, openness. They'll look at the score, and from there, it generates a profile about you. Yeah, Louis, this is the Neo PI, right? The NEO personality inventory. Where's my marker? It's a red marker. The online question was, is this the? Yeah, this is the one. The Big 5 gold standard measurement, the inventory is the Neo PI. Like I said, it started off with NEO, neuroticism, extroversion, and openness. But later on, right, in 1980, they decided that it's not sufficient to just look at NEO. So they added the conscientiousness and the agreeableness into it. And by then, they have sufficient research to also throw in, right, question items to beef up the questionnaire so that it also measures the C and the A part. Okay. Now there is a video for you to watch, but it is actually a revision of all the Big 5 because I have already explained them here. So I will leave you to watch it at home as part of when you are doing a revision. It'll be good to watch that video. Okay, so I will upload it by tomorrow. All right. So last chance, if you have some videos you have not downloaded, please go download it because tomorrow I will upload this thing there. All right, lecture 8. If I have not uploaded, actually I have 3 classes that require me to stop video, so I'm not sure whether I did it for you already. If the lecture 8 video is there, no? Okay.
The last one was lecture 4.
So somewhere along there, I think 6, 7, all these don't have much videos, and then I think it's this class. 2 of the videos I did not actually get permission to distribute it. All right, because they're part of a student's project or something like that. So those can only watch it once in class, or there is no video. But this lecture right has something, so go refer to it. I will upload it tomorrow. Okay, so if you haven't, please go and download whatever that is already there. All right. Yeah, we will talk about the Myers-Briggs soon. Okay, somebody online is asking about this MBTI. Some of you are familiar, MBTI scale. We are reaching that soon. Okay, just hold on. Are you Dianopra or are you Aki? Okay, so hang on, okay, Aki. Now, the Dropbox link is the same one as I have sent out. I have always have a Dropbox of videos, but I think either this batch or the last batch onwards, right? TSPP actually started a Dropbox too because they needed to distribute notes to all of you. But TSPP doesn't have the license to hold some of the videos that I have. That's why, I mean, I was there first, right? Then later on, the COVID happened, and that's why they set up this thing. So don't become confused. There are actually 2 links. They cannot access the one that I have because this institution it's what we call profit center. So some of the links, right, or some of the videos, they cannot be distributed to a profit center unless they purchase the license for it. All right. So it will still be the same link that I have emailed out to all of you. All right. Now, okay, let me finish up with this so we can move on. Remember to put a star on this slide. Openness refers to whether you are willing to accept new ideas. I mean, so we're looking at your inclination to accept new ideas, to be creative, So the higher you score on this, the likelier you will churn out new ideas, you are willing to consider new solutions. Conscientiousness refers to how inclined the person is to be hardworking, to follow rules, right? To be a conformist, basically. Extroversion, you already know. Agreeableness and openness is usually mixed up and confused over. So be careful of that. Agreeableness is the person's inclination to go for harmony, to be cooperative. Okay? So although some people, when they are working right, they have to follow rules and be cooperative, but we are talking about different things here. Because when you are agreeable, when you are cooperative, you are also what? You are also less likely to start a quarrel or start a conflict. But a person who is like score high in, let's say, openness, they may want to question you, because although they are open to new ideas, but they will question, although this is a new idea, okay, maybe we'll implement it, but what are some of the disadvantages? You notice they can still be critical. They don't, although they are open to accept the new idea, that doesn't mean they will blindly accept the new idea. All right. Then for conscientiousness, of course, some jobs will promote both things. You have to be cooperative and you have to follow a structure. Like, let's say you work in the police force. Obviously, you have to work with your own team. And you have to follow rules. All right? You cannot have, like, you're chasing after some robber and then suddenly you feel like, I will go this way, you go that way. No, you have a certain plan of how to chase after the crooks, right? But don't mix them up. They really refer to different things. Being cooperative doesn't mean that you will always conform. It just means that you don't want to easily start a quarrel. But some people, right, they wouldn't even think of, okay, they just go through with it. They are more tolerant. Okay, so for a revision, just watch that video. And the problem lies with what? A lot of people talk about the Big Five, saying that, well, it is too overgeneralized. Can you really describe people with just these 5 traits? I mean, they say that certainly we understand that you are not doing it like the zodiac sign. Like one class, like if you say that you are a Gemini, that means you are probably, cunning, and you have two-faced, you are hypocritical, although you are quick thinking. So many different traits in one class. Whereas the Big Five, one item there, the openness, only talks about your inclination to accept ideas, creativity. Nothing else really. They don't mix in anything else. Okay? So it's more specific. That's why people like it. But they feel that, could you be like too superficial? Can you really describe people based on only 5 very specific kind of characteristics? So obviously the answer from the experts is no, of course we can't. So they accept that criticism. They say we can't. What happened is we still want to know roughly these people's disposition, their trait, their likelihood of acting in that particular way. Of course, in the future, if we have time and resources, we will research and look at other traits. But for now, we will stick to these 5 as like the well-researched. So that was 1980s. Subsequently, there were actually other traits promoted, but none of them actually reached the level of research. That means with sufficient data to support the conceptualization of the traits as these Big 5. And if you think about it, right, it's a logical flaw there. This Big 5 started like what? Decades ago. So anything that comes later probably wouldn't have a chance to churn out, to have so much evidence churns out to support them. So they never really got roped in. Those of you who did modules on positive psychology, learning about character strengths and virtues, that is one good example. So of course, if you don't understand this, never mind. All right. I will still talk about a thing or two from it. In this thing about character strengths, refer to only positive type of characteristics. Okay, like kindness is one of them. So they have several characteristics, and then it combines into one almost like cardinal trait. So altruism is a cardinal trait. But because that's already used, so we move one level up in positive psychology. So those experts in positive psychology, eventually, right, it was actually Seligman and Peterson. They compiled, they measured it, they compiled it, and they found things like compassion would be a virtue. So although it's very difficult to define it, but it seems like all the countries you go to, all the various ethnic groups, people have no problem understanding what is compassion. Although they describe it in slightly different ways. But you can't run away from some elements of altruism, kindness, all right, willing to do good for others. Okay? Now, but compassion, altruism, all this came a little later compared to this. Remember, some of these things started in the mid-1920s by Gordon Allport. So, and then the so-called character strengths, all this were proposed only somewhere between 1995 to 1998. We are looking at a 7-decade difference. So because there's insufficient evidence turned out to support all these newer traits, the term personality traits, right, is a technical term. It never included some of these new things. So no need to become confused when you read and you say, how come there's always this big 5 mentioned and the rest nothing mentioned? When you come to, for example, this school and then you learn from our modules and you say, but there's also character strength. Why never said? Because the old school experts, right, they refuse to grant entry and categorize some of these new things as personality traits. But they are just being stubborn because they feel that there is insufficient evidence. All right. So to oppose this, people like Martin Seligman, Peterson decided that we will still consider this as some characteristics, but we give a different term so that these old school people, all right, they want to distinguish it, fine, let's distinguish it. Okay, got it? All right. Now, beyond this, I'm going to speed up again. So eventually some work was done looking at the Big 5. So because that was 1980, right? So until today, it was found that Big 5 is pretty good. All right, if you are going to do things like, allocate people into a certain career, and it can really explain that kind of behavior, like whether a person is open to new ideas. So they say that's good. The bad part is, because you only have these 5 characteristics, it's really bad at saying who, two people, right, A and B, how different they are. I mean, if you put them on a scale like just now, Jeremy and me, so suppose he's at 60% mark, I'm 80% mark, you can only say that I'm a more anxiety-prone person compared to him. Beyond that, what else can you say? Not much. So still not very good. Okay? Can't really tell people exact things about individual differences. So you ultimately still have to rely on interviewing. Then people say, like, this is quite stupid. You come up with something after 100 years and it's still so lousy. But that's the nature of how science works. Unless it is something very influential, otherwise people are not going to pump in a lot of money to refine it. So it will take decades of work before we realize something out of it. So if you want to know what's going to happen, just make sure you live another 50 more years. Okay, then after that you read up, now I know the final conclusion. And then you can live, not live, live peacefully ever after. Okay? All right. All right, now to talk about how we measure these. So we now have a rough idea of what people talk about. So we know the what, but how do they arrive at this? What measurements are there? You only so far heard a broad thing called the NeoPI. Then later on, we will look at the MBTI too. So this is since the early 1900s. So from a Freudian tradition, there is this personality measurement tool called the Rorschach's ink blot. Originally, it was just black and white. Then they created color to it. But before I move on, right, I want to maybe, Charlene, you can help type this in. Where is my duster? Personality inventory or personality skills, right? Basically, there are two broad types. They are called projective personality scales and objective personality scales. Okay? I don't think they can see. We tried. From the chat box.
Yeah, I typed it into the.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So basically, right, this is the subjective type of test. Then these are the more quantitative type of tests. Done copying? Okay, now if you're done, look at the board, look at the TV or your monitor if you're online. Now, look at this picture and follow the question through. What does it look like to you? In other words, right, what does it remind you of? Okay, let's hear it from two people, okay? Although, by right, I should have recorded them so that they don't listen to each other. But this is not a lab. So let's hope the thing can be demonstrated. This time around, we go from the back. Okay, the last two people. Well, we begin with, okay, online, you just listen to, I will repeat the thing, okay? Just a moment. All right, on my right side. So, the lady at the back, this, what do you see? Opera mask.
Traditional.
The traditional, okay, she says this color ink block thing is it looks like the traditional Chinese opera mask. And the guy at the back, a butterfly, and specifically the butterfly wings. Now, if we go on this, right, different people will say different things. I mean, eventually, of course, some people will still repeat the butterfly thing, right? Now, think about it. This will be useful for online people since you can't see, all right, your two friends in class. For the answer, right, that says butterfly. What kind of personality does he have? Huh? What are you talking about, Mr. Lam? Right? And then I can shoot the other way. I said, opera mask. What is her personality? If you have a jaw, you'll probably reach the floor now, right? Yeah. It's subjective. What are you going to say about it, right? But apparently, they have thousands and thousands of people answering this. Then after that, they study and then they look at, okay, so people of this certain personality, they usually answer it this way. Okay? And then otherwise, they answer the other way. So from there, they realize now that the way you answer can have some telltale implications on your personality. Okay, don't ask me what it is. I don't know. I wasn't trained to do Rorschach ink block. I basically don't like anything that is subjective or too subjective. So when I have to do, last time I had to do personality measurements, I didn't do Rorschach ink block. Okay? I belong to the school of objective tests. Now let's look at some more of these projective tests kind of thing. So now you know what this means. All right, projective tests are good too. Because you look at point number 2, I'd like you to read it. Okay, just in case you heard what I said, I don't like projective tests and then you get influenced by it. There are advantages to using projective tests. Because projective tests give free flow answers, so it's less restrictive and you probably have a better chance interacting and obtaining information from the person that you are asking questions about, or maybe a person you want to investigate on. All right? So that's why it's never phased out. By now, actually, up to about the 60s, 70s, right, we have about equal numbers of people going for both kinds of tests. But from then onwards, right, most people prefer the objective test. Okay, because it's really very tough to do all these projective techniques. The tough part is not about it's not about getting the info. The tough part is how to interpret it without being judgmental, without getting too many errors in your interpretation, because it's too subjective. But don't think that it's really that bad. It's for the experts, it's really very powerful. Like I can't remember the name. I remember reading this of course this person is already old and experienced. So this psychologist, right, he also loves objective tests. He's a clinical psychologist. And his account of his teacher, when he was doing his PhD, he was trained in Rorschach methods too. His teacher teaching him Rorschach method, right, was a superb expert in it. How superb? Now what she did, so the guy I read, his description is a guy, his teacher is a lady. Now what she did was this, she asked all the trainees, right, go use Rorschach test, go assess one patient, and after the patient says everything right, I'd like you to come back and tell me what's your evaluation. So of course as a student, he did that. And he came back. Now remember his teacher, the expert, right, she did not read case sheet, she did not come into contact with the patient. So she doesn't know the patient at all. Now, but she took the Rorschach ink blot test, and then right, she added on more information for the guy. So the guy usually will just interpret a bit because he was new, so interpret a bit and then that's it, it got stuck. But the teacher, right, went on to explain, not only does this patient have this ABC kind of personality, look at it, she probably also has XYZ kind of medical condition. And how do you tell medical condition without looking at x-rays, without looking at blood reports, and blah, blah, blah. She said a lot of things. Then he was like, okay, let me go and check. Because he didn't collect the data for, and he went to look at the case sheet and found that, yeah, it's actually correct. So how did you know, without doing all the blood tests and all these things, how do you know that this person has this kind of have problems? But this kind of feat, right, most of us cannot do. People like me cannot. All right? It's too difficult to be trained to this level. At least I have never been able to do that. So anything that's too subjective, I know I will just be average. But there are people who can really, be very outstanding in these kind of things. Okay? So projective techniques are not really that bad. To me, it's difficult. To some people, maybe it's easy. Okay? So the majority of us who cannot do projective tests, what do? We complain that it's meaningless, it's subjective, right? Then we have to come up with something. So no, not this. These are other examples of projective tests. Like if you look at this, right? Look at this picture. Now look at the question. Okay. So if you say that, I haven't moved on to objective tests yet. So just now I was at this. Right? It's very subjective. So some people don't like totally ambiguous figure. They come up with another projective test known as, let me spell it out for you. The TAT is short form for thematic apperception test. So it's based on a certain theme. Basically, how you interpret this is that theme. All right, different people have different interpretation. You find that some people will say, oh, the old woman is like admiring the young woman in front of her. Some people say that the old woman is reminiscing about the time when she was beautiful. Various stories. Okay? Then, so basically this explains to you the thematic apperception test. All right. Now, let's take a look at how subjective it could be. Okay? Let's watch a fun video. Now, this is like two students trying to ask their one of their cousin, their nephews about things. Then you listen to the interpretation. Okay, later. I think we probably need to make it louder.
Maybe they want a girl and they want to fight her.
Okay, the question they asked him was, why do you think these two tigers are fighting? Okay.
They want to fight, and who wins, they gets the girl.
Gets the girl. So there's a female tiger somewhere?
Good.
That's really good. So do you think they're like friends or brothers or cousins or?
Cousins, maybe.
And they're fighting over a girl that they
Yeah.
both like.
Yeah.
So whoever wins gets the girl, right?
Yeah.
What happens to the loser?
No, I thought you meant the cousin wants to win, let him win or someone. Maybe someone that he didn't know, and that's maybe a bully
A bully?
that bullies him.
No. Bullies are awful.
So, what we've concluded is that at your school, you have a friend, and you're fighting over the same girl, and
Maybe the other guy is a bully.
yeah.
Yeah, he actually is, Mikhailo. Remember, he stole my silly string. I wanted it back.
This is good information.
What's his name again?
Mikhailo.
Mikhailo.
Don't you find this very judgmental? All right. So it's like, whatever people say, just draw a very direct, correlated conclusion. That is something which a lot of people are not comfortable with. All right. It's very judgmental. It's very superficial. It's too sweeping. But so there are these kind of elements in trying to do the thematic apperception tests. All right. Of course, that's not the exact way it's done, because I can't release versions of how exactly it's done. It's all copyrighted. But here you find that I am able to show you that sometimes the conclusions they come to can be quite sweeping. And suddenly, you just take the thing wholesale and repeat it back to me. Is that even substantial? What if I was trying to fake it up and then you just happily use it? So subjectivity is not always that good. All right. Okay. Yeah.
A quick question, right? Like for all these tests, the projective or the objective or even a new test, right? Has people ever done it like twice in their life? Let's say
Yes.
early on, does the result varies because of life experience? Let's say if you do it in your 20s versus when you do it in your 50s, like the personality.
But then you are giving a many number of years. So the person could have really changed. Let's shorten it. So suppose, right, I measure it in not 20, 30 years, but it's just 6 years. So given that personality traits should not be changing much, because remember it's defined as characteristics that are relatively permanent. So for the NEO test, I'll give you one example. What's the name? Sorry, often I cannot recall the three researchers who did it, but it was a study that was done in 1994. And what they did was they measured, right, people of different age groups. So they measured from children all the way to elderly people. And what they did was, it was a longitudinal study. They measured the person once first, and then 6 years down the road, they measured the person again. Of course, those people who passed away in the meantime, then the data is like considered lost. So that's not counted. So those people who have managed to stay alive, got repeated measures, they found that actually the personality characteristics really didn't change that much. So the same test was used. They didn't change it to like next version. It was same test. 6 years later, it was still like that. And they even derive a certain pattern. Now think about it. Which age group, right? So we look at children, teenagers, young adults, middle adults, old adults. Which age group would you expect to have the most change in their thinking patterns, in their personality? Which group? Teenagers. Why teenagers? Why teenagers? Because we learned at that time, that is the stage where they are exploring, they have enough thinking ability at the time, right? It's just mature. And with that full ability, they are trying to explore about themselves. And indeed, that was the pattern they found. So first off, right, they even cite off numbers. Like if you look at teenagers, once they are measured at 14 years old, so by the time they reach 20 years old, they're just out. They found that about, let me do the maths a bit, about 9-point-something% of their personality characteristics. So they measured whatever you have now. So suppose they measure 100 different items, 100 different traits. Of course, there's no such thing. I'm just giving you a number, so it's easy to understand. And they found that about 9 of them remain the same, unchanged. But as people age, they are more and more permanent because they no longer need to explore that much. So by 50 years old, it was found that if I measure at 50 years old and I compare you with your 56 years old, on average, you will retain about 49% of all your traits. Now we're looking at 6 years change, but it doesn't change much. Then that's not all. Another bunch of people, they looked at people with mild brain injury. Meaning, these people suffer a concussion so bad that they faint for at least 24 hours, but no longer than 72 hours. So this is mild, definitely mild brain damage. And yet, they found that the personality doesn't change much. All right? Overall, so looking at age, where it's tied down, you find that about 60 to 70% of their traits, right, remain unchanged before versus after the injury. So of course, this study has a lot of limitation because you don't really know who will end up with injury first. And they are not going to deliberately hurt people's brain. All right, so they look at people who already previously, somehow they already had measurements before, and then they track these people down with brain injury, and then they measured them. All right. But although the number is much smaller, as in the sample size is much smaller, but the findings is pretty clear cut. Even with mild brain injury, you hardly have much change. So personality characteristics is something that's very ingrained in us. It doesn't change that easily, one. Whether you're talking about across time or across trauma. Okay? All right. So what about objective tests? Objective tests are the most famous of all would be this thing. So please put a star there. What exactly it is, I can't show you because it's copyrighted. But just know that there's such a thing here. This thing measures 10 personality traits rather than 5. Do I need you to memorize them all? No, no need. So you should expect very simple question. Is there something that measures 10 personality traits? Yes. What is the world's most commonly used objective test? Oh, it's the MMPI. But then after that you say, oh, what's the MMPI? Okay, then that's not my bad already. It's Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. Okay, let's move on. So after they found out, they compared across the board. They adjusted the score to make sure that it's comparable. So they standardized the age, standardized many things, and they found that MMPI is actually quite robust. So not only do you have subjective tests that are pretty good, projective tests that are pretty good at looking at people like, oh, not really change that much. Objective tests also, after they measure, they figure out that this also stand the test of time. All right, just now what I mentioned was the NeoPI was tested 6 years later, it was consistent. Then MMPI also tested and found to be consistent. This thing actually has an interesting history. MMPI was actually developed by not by psychologists. It was developed by psychologists, yes, but they were more like cardiologists. They were heart specialists. Then you say, why would the heart specialist do this? Back in the 40s, 50s, right? That time we don't have ECG and all this. So they usually can only rely on the stethoscope to listen. All right, unless the person died, then they can open up and see. So they also wanted to ask questions and see whether they can derive some idea of cardiac problems from the person's daily living, from the person's personality, because at that time they were already influenced by what? People who are usually very angry, they tend to have more episodes of heart attack. So these kind of things, right? So this was developed, but eventually they discarded it because after working on it for like 10 years, 15 years, they couldn't get anywhere. This thing is like measures personality. I mean, the cardiologists are not interested in personality. So to them, this tool cannot be used. Because no matter how we fine-tune it, it doesn't tell us whether a person is more or less likely to have heart problem. But the psychologists took over and figure out that actually it's a good measure of personality. So one man's food is another man's poison, right? So psychologists took over and then they started to use it. Now it's already MMPI-3. It's not so long. All right, the longest. So this thing has 3 versions. Every few generations later, they have to come up with a new set of things because the old things won't be relevant for the current culture. The longest ever was actually the MMPI-2, the second version. The items are asked in such a way where you only need to circle a yes, no, or true, false. All right, so it's just a false choice. But because it's like there are 567 questions to answer, it takes you about 1.5 to 2 hours to finish the stupid inventory. It's damn long. Okay? Yeah. Last time when I have to use this, I will have to you can't be sticking to the person. So you just have the person come finish all the clinical interview, then you tell him, okay, you have this thing to do. You put him in a room and then just ask the nurse to, okay, watch, don't let him leave first. He should finish this. Then you go and do your things. Do, finish 1.5 hours later, come back, still doing, okay, almost done. Then drink a cup of tea, okay, can. All right. So it's that long to do this thing. All right. Plenty of things to answer. It's a surprise that the respondents never faint while doing it. But they realized it's a problem of being too long. So now I can't remember how many they cut down. They cut down many questions. Okay, but it was still valid by MMPI-3. Anyway, let's sum it up. In a nutshell, we have, in order to measure personality, we have projective tests and objective tests. The projective tests, the famous ones are Rorschach-Ink block and thematic apperception. But they are all requiring somebody's subjective responses. So it's very difficult to do interpretation. Sometimes people accuse the expert of being too judgmental. So, but it has its uses in the sense that it is not very, it doesn't hurt your privacy too much. So people are more forthcoming with the information. So to validate someone's personality, we also have objective tests. So these are tests which you can score. So then you will know what is the person's magnitude of that personality. And the most common one being what? The MMPI, right? Okay. And but it is very lengthy to use. So although it's used in various hospitals and institutions, but most of us prefer the other one, which measures the how many items? 5. Also, nicknamed the Big 5, right? What is the objective personality test to measure the Big 5? Okay. Neo personality inventory. All right, it has nothing to do with Matrix, the movie. The Neo is simply neuroticism, extraversion, openness. Okay. All right. Now, then there are other simpler tools like your Myers-Briggs. So, tell you what. We are about time for a break, so I will just play this video. Once you finish watching, we go for the break. All right? Yeah. So the video is very fast. It's like less than 5 minutes.
Okay, so there's a 93 question test called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. You've probably heard of it. It's the most widely used personality test in the world.
The most definitive personality test of them all is the Myers-Briggs.
And the company that makes it, CPP, reportedly earns about $20 million from the 2 million people that take it and the companies that administer it every single year.
So you take this test, you answer these 93 questions, and it tells you you're one of 16 different personality types. The only problem is that this test is completely meaningless. Clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, anyone working to understand human behavior who doesn't have a stake in the financial success of this test doesn't actually even believe in it.
So let's step back a little.
In 1921, Carl Jung, an enormously influential early psychologist, hypothesized that humans fall into a number of different types.
There are perceivers and judgers, people who prefer sensing over intuition. There are thinkers and there are
Very much like the zodiac signs, horoscopes thing, right? So this is supposed to be an objective test.
feelers.
But even at the time, he realized that most people didn't fit neatly into one category or another. He wrote,
"Every individual is an exception to the rule."
So then, a few decades later, a pair of Americans who had no formal training in psychology, Catherine Briggs and her daughter, Isabel Briggs Myers, decided to take these ideas and turn them into what they called a type indicator.
Around 1945, they first began testing it. They took Jung's types but slightly altered the terminology and changed it so that every single person was assigned only one possibility or another. You couldn't be a little bit of an extrovert or a little bit of an introvert. But people don't actually work that way, so the results simply aren't reliable. One study found that as much as 50% of people who took the test twice arrived at different results, even though it was only 5 weeks later.
5 weeks and the results change. Do you consider that as relatively permanent? So relatively permanent would be like just now, right? It has to be maybe 6 years later, you are still having most of it retained. And brain injury doesn't really dislodge your characteristics.
And a reported 89 of the Fortune 100 companies and 200 federal agencies use the test to separate employees and potential hires into types and assign them appropriate training programs and responsibilities. But multiple studies have shown that the test totally fails to predict people's success in various jobs.
The really strange thing is that there are leading psychologists on their board, and none of them use the test in their personal research. You know, in 2012, Carl Thorson, a Stanford psychologist and board member of CPP, admitted that it would be questioned by his academic colleagues if he actually used the Myers-Briggs in his research.
Wait, why is the Myers-Briggs so popular?
Well, it really only gives positive results, and it plays into the idea of people fitting neatly into categories. People love categories.
You can't take the test and be told that you're selfish or lazy or mean. The results are always positive.
Because the descriptions are vague, they're hard to argue with. This is called the Forer effect, and is a technique long used by purveyors of astrology, fortune-telling, and other sorts of pseudoscience to persuade people they have accurate information about them.
There's something really attractive about assigning ourselves different personalities. This is why horoscopes are so popular. This is why we love taking BuzzFeed quizzes. But the truth is that human personalities are really complicated.
You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking the test as a fun activity, but it's important to remember, the Myers-Briggs is useful for one thing: entertainment.
Okay? All right. I see you all 20 minutes later, which is 8:55. So, okay. Yeah, I have to repeat. Okay, never mind. The recording just came on, and we only missed one line. Some people say sleep. Isn't this a neurological thing? Isn't this a
standard tool for measuring the stages of sleep is something known as an electroencephalogram, usually referred to as an EEG for short.
Why is there? Okay, I have no idea why there is a sound. Okay. I think it will come back again. Where did that thing go? Oh, it's. Oh. I think the sound will come out again. Because there might be some things embedded here. Yeah. Well, I can open again, but I think it will come back.
This is an instrument by which you can measure the electrical activity.
Wait, it's... oh, I can't control it. Is there any way I can just... We can't kill the... I don't know where that thing is embedded into.
I'll just mute it.
Okay, we mute it and test like that, from here.
Thank you.
Then later video we'll turn it on again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
That means I can do this, right? Sorry, technical problem. There. Like that is muted, right? But would the online people also, would they still hear it? Oh yeah, share sound, right? So we don't.
Yeah.
Then this is not a problem.
Okay.
No, this is because it's paused, is it? If I
think it's okay.
So no more sharing. Yeah, it's still there. I thought I removed it, but the online people will hear it, right?
No, they won't because I stopped the share sound.
Oh, so now both sides are stopped. Okay, got it. Okay, now we're back to the idea is, isn't this a neurological thing? Well, it is. Sleep has to do with the way our nervous system functions. So all this while, people have thought that sleeping is a behavior, but actually sleep can be investigated in many ways. All right. Now, some parts are psychological, so we'll just stick to that. Nowadays, right, psychologists have more tools. We don't just ask someone to sleep and we measure only their breathing and stuff. We are able to measure the brain activity. So if you take a look at this, right, this is called the electroencephalogram. It is used to measure brain activity, at least one type of brain activity. What type? The electrical activity. So you've probably heard about, okay, is this some kind of like MRI scan? Nope. MRI scan, which I think we talked about it a little bit before. It measures blood flow in your brain. So different parts of the brain, when it's active, it will need more blood. So looking at the way the blood flows in the brain, the machine is able to picture, to work out, right, a picture of brain activity looking at how much blood is required in certain parts. Here, it will actually be looking at the total amount of action potential. You remember you learned action potential, which is the electrical impulse in a nerve. So in a nerve cell, so if there are multiple nerve cells firing away, different parts of the brain having different amounts, will give rise to different activity, different electrical activity. A simple way to conceptualize this, right, is to think of how about a decorated Christmas tree? You know, we tend to pull up a lot of light bulbs around the Christmas tree, right? Now, imagine you are looking at such a Christmas tree with all the flashes of light, but this tree is put, let's say, 1 kilometer away from you. So now it's like a tiny tree in the distance. Now, in the distance, how many of you think you can see the flash? Those are those tiny little flashlights. You probably can't. Okay? What you will see is that the tree will like glow brighter when more of the light bulbs, those flashy light bulbs, when more of the flashy light bulbs turn on, the tree will grow brighter. And then if less of it are lighted up, it will grow darker. But when you close up, you'll see a lot of all these flashing lights, right? So all these flashing light bulbs are just like the neurons firing. But each of them firing, if you close up, you can probably measure it if you have some tools. But you think of EEG as something very far away. So you will see it grow brighter, dimmer, brighter, dimmer. Now maybe there's a faster frequency. So that's what the EEG is supposed to measure. And you have different parts of the brain. So it's like there are several of these trees in the distance. So you literally see some of them brighter and some of them dimmer than the others, and vice versa. Okay, and they are randomly flashing. So this is actually what EEG is about. Okay, that's this thing. And from there, we realize that sleep is not a one behavior thing. Actually, different stages of sleep requires you to behave in different ways. Although most of the time throughout the sleep, the nervous system inhibits you. So it makes sure that the signals from various parts of your brain, right, cannot reach the motor parts, so you won't act out your dream. Or you won't act out anything at all in your sleep except in slumber. So you just lie there. Of course, you can toss and turn a bit because there will still be signals of what maybe you've slept in a certain way, you've pressed down on yourself, and now there's a lot of discomfort here. So that this signal will reach the brain and say that, look, if you don't shift, it's going to be too warm here, or it's going to be too painful here. So in order to survive, it will occasionally unblock a bit of this signal and you toss and you turn a little bit. But otherwise, generally, we are inhibited from action. So sleep is really inhibition of action. It's not simply you are unconscious. You are unconscious, yes, but you also have all your signals, the motor signals are blocked. Now, and we've also heard before the term, right? Sleep is a waste of time. There's a lot of people who say that, oh, I cannot, I got to work more, so I sleep less, right? So can you actually train yourself to not sleep that much? Can, but only to a certain extent. All right? Now, is it okay? Is it acceptable? Yeah, the answer is no. All right? So let's look at this. I think now we need the sound, but it's okay, right? If it's video that I'm gonna play.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe you check and see if they can hear it. I will go to.
Play, then
Jamie, along with the rest of us, doesn't stay in deep, slow wave sleep all night. At a certain point, his brain waves change.
After about 50 or 60 minutes, your brain will start to rise back up, and then it will pop up and have a short REM sleep period. Turns out that those two types of sleep, non-REM and REM, will play out in a battle for brain domination throughout the night. And that sort of cerebral war is going to be won and lost every 90 minutes.
We spend
Okay, you've seen already some technical terms. The so-called non-REM and REM sleep. What they are is that, you see, you can't really describe all this brain activity. So when they first studied it, right, they just divided into two classifications. One will be whether there is associated eye movement. So people realize that in your sleep, there are times when your eyes are still, no movement. Then, right, when it begins, when this so-called REM stage starts, the eyes will be darting. They won't be like cartoon, go all over the place like that. No. Okay, your eyeball won't dart like that. They will go in synchrony still. Like if you look to the left, now both eyeballs will look to the left. But what happened is, it will move very fast across. So, it's almost impossible for you to do it when you're awake. Because if you try, you might actually end up with a headache. But otherwise, the eyeball will dart very fast. They will go left, right, all this very, very quickly. Okay, sometimes a bit up and down, but mostly left, right. So initially, people thought, is it the person is dreaming? So they are like looking at their dreams, looking at the dreams. Well, it isn't. So now that you know that what is REM, rapid eye movement, versus non-rapid eye movement, the non-REM, let's finish up the video first, okay?
most of the night in non-REM sleep. The rest of the time we spend in the mysterious stage of REM sleep.
It's hard to investigate REM sleep without investigating dreams, because more than 80% of REM periods would include a dream.
Dreams tend to be emotional.
She's giving the low estimation. Most of the time, you find that all the studies show that in REM sleep, so when you reach the stage of sleep where there's a lot of eye movement, 90% chance you're actually dreaming. Okay, not so much 80, it's closer to 90.
One idea is that we dream to simulate potentially negative events so that we're prepared for them. I had a dream when my daughter was very young that she fell into the swimming pool. She was near drowning. After that, I put my daughters into swim lessons, and water safety has been important to me.
It's not that we do not dream in the other sleep stages, we do, but the most vivid ones are in REM sleep.
REM sleep is named for the rapid eye movements we make when we dream.
We believe that every time the eyes move in a dream, it's a special moment where we sort of switch to the next dream scene, if you will.
As we switch from one dream to the next, our brain waves are doing something downright strange.
With REM sleep, the brain waves look just like waves from when you're awake.
We have this paradox that it's a state of sleep, but yet our brain is in a state of activation.
But perhaps the strangest feature of this stage of sleep is what's happening in your body.
During REM sleep, our brain actually sends the instructions to the different muscles to move our body as if we were awake. But lower down in the brainstem, these instructions are disrupted. They are not relayed to the body, and the body remains paralyzed. Otherwise, if we had a dream where we fly above the city, we would literally jump out of the window.
From the dreams of REM sleep, we cycle back into non-REM sleep, including the deepest stage of sleep, slow wave.
In the first half of the night, the majority of those cycles are comprised of deep non-REM sleep. Yet as you push through to the second half of the night, now that ratio balance shifts, and instead the majority of those cycles are comprised of much more rapid eye movement sleep, dream sleep, and a lot less deep non-REM sleep.
What is crazy about this is the pattern is so absolutely reliable in virtually everybody every night. It speaks to a fundamental genetically driven program that is essential for being a human being. You have to go through this.
Okay, meaning you have to sleep. And less than about only 5% of the population will be able to survive on just about 5 to 6 hours of sleep without any big problem. So we are looking at 95% who needs the usual about 6.5 to 8 hours of sleep. And definitely less than 1%, all right, can go at where it's about 4.5 to 5 hours. And you find that it's about 1 in a million chance you'll find someone who will be able to survive on somewhere between 3.5 to 4.5 hours of sleep per night. Okay? And then you say, but no, I think some yoga gurus, they can actually sleep like maybe say 1 to 3 hours per night. But you must know, a lot of all these gurus, they take hours to meditate daily. So they are simulating sleep when people are doing work. All right? So you don't really run away from sleep. But I wanted to ask you questions about this instead of telling you the answers. But unfortunately, in the interest of time, I have spilled the beans. Let me go back to... All right, that was an overview of... Oh, we need to not share not share sound, right? Yep. Okay. So what happened is, we are going to look at sleep. You can think of sleep as a behavior, a human behavior. But it is actually not just humans. Basically, animals and insects, they also sleep. All right? It's just that the amount of time we spend sleeping are probably different because we belong to different species. Like, I mean, if you go all the way to the other end, maybe say little ants. So ants are very tiny, right? They also sleep. But the queen ants and the worker ants, they sleep differently. All right? So ants sleep a total of about 4 hours per day. Not like humans, we need about 7 to 8 hours. And the worker ants, they sleep lesser. They usually nap for about 1.5 minutes and then they're up working. Then after some time, they will, about 5-10 minutes later, they will sleep. So they on off sleep. But a queen ant would be able to sleep for a stretch of about 2 hours. And they usually sleep longer. They catch about 5 to 6 hours of sleep throughout the whole day. All right. For humans, adults, we need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and we should be able to go through daily living without a need for a nap. When you need to nap, it's most of the time it's because you have overworked yourself. You become too tired. All right. Or you have 7 to 8 hours of sleep, but it's not quality sleep. So then you need a nap too. All right. So different species, different environmental conditions means that we have to behave differently when it comes to sleep. And there is no way so far we haven't found any animal or insects, right, that can survive without sleep. You can try to survive without food. So as long as you drink some water, you can survive for a long time. You just can't survive very long without sleep. All the animal studies, insect studies that are on sleep deprivation, eventually the animal will just suddenly die. So they, for example, they make the animal stay awake, right? So when they fall asleep, right, they shock the animal to wake, keep them awake. So after a few weeks of torture, the poor animal will just suddenly die. All right. So that's how bad these experiments are. So that gives you a new idea of why you should not be psychologists. All right. Now, yeah. Actually, no. Only babies up to about adolescents, they need more sleep. Once you are adolescent to old age, adult, you actually need the same level of sleep every night. But the problem is a lot of old people, they are disturbed from normal sleep. So once we hit about 50 plus, 60 years old, right, in every society, all the elderly, they go through the same thing. They are disturbed from their sleep. And everyone saw that and they thought that was normal. But sleep labs show that even if you are elderly, but you are clocking like, let's say 6 instead of 7.5 to 8 hours, your cognitive functioning will drop. You are no longer optimal. And if you are deprived of even a little bit of sleep for too long, you may be functioning at the levels equivalent to maybe a mild brain injured level rather than optimal levels. So elderly people tend to lose sleep because they worry more, or they have more aches and pains, which stops them from proper sleep. Those are the two main causes, right? So unfortunately, it's a wrong belief to think that elderly people need less sleep. It's wrong. All the biological measurements show that they really need, in fact, they should sleep the same, because we will come to that later about how your body repairs itself. Okay, so we go back to the beginning. That was just to show you an overview of this behavior called sleep. All right. And you've learned from that overview that we actually either we stay awake or we go into sleep, but sleep has two very big kind of activity going on. All right. Now, and then of course there is something called dreams. All right. There's even alpha state. We will look at that later. So let's move on. This is just a slide showing you the various types of waves, the electrical activities, like when they turn on, turn off, what it looks like. And it's all put into one slide, so it can be very confusing. I don't need you to memorize any of it. All I'm doing is to put them together to show you how different they can be. Like, if you take a look, at this, you know, like when we are awake, how should it be like? There is like a lot of compressed vibrations. The vibration simply means turning on, turning off of electrical activity. Now, I'd like you to imagine back the Christmas tree analogy. So from far, far away, you can't see the little light bulbs, which are all the tiny neurons firing away. But you can see, right, suddenly glowing brighter and glowing dimmer. So the top part, right, the top left side shows you a wave that's what? That if you're standing far away, you should see the Christmas tree going what? Going like bright, dim very quickly. Okay? But as you go into sleep, it will be what? The brightness will like take a long time to brighten up, then take longer time to dim down, and after that it goes brighter again. But this is still very common sense. What people did not expect is that as you get deeper and deeper into sleep, right, sometimes there can be a spike. So back to the Christmas tree, it looks like this. You have brighter. So initially when you're awake, it's like bright, dim very quickly, right? So as it slows down, you have bright, you dim. So you would expect this to continue and get slower and slower. But suddenly, it's like there's suddenly like a camera flash. Boom. Then you wonder what happened to the tree. I was looking at it glowing brighter a bit, and then dimming a little bit, brighter a bit, dimming a bit, then suddenly there's like a camera flash. What is that? Okay. Now, if you reason it out, you will think that there must be more activity because there's a sudden explosion. Or, in other words, we describe it as, hey, there must be a sudden explosion of activity. But we realize that is still not dream. So it seems like as you sleep, there are times when there is like, as it brightens slowly, dims slowly, there are times when certain parts of the brain will need to reorganize themselves. So they suddenly go into a lot of activity, like what is shown in the mouse here, just so that they can synchronize with other parts. And then after that, right, there can be a bright flash, all right, as a sign of adjustment. This simply tells us that the brain activity is not slowing down. There is some kind of synchronizing going on. Perhaps that implies that different parts of our brain are processing different information and they need to tie down. Now, if that's true, then the brain is not really asleep. So you experience it as loss of consciousness, you knock out, but what happened is the brain is undergoing a different and maybe even more activity than when you were awake. The only thing is we can't just knock, hey, brain, wake up, tell me, what you doing, huh? You can't do that. So you have no idea what that brain is actually going through. We just see it from machines, measurements, that everyone is going through the same thing, that somehow the brain is trying to adjust and is going through some activity. Okay? Now, so people continue to observe, and then they find that the waves slow down, and then suddenly there is like, it's no longer just a bright flash like camera flash, but there is a sudden increase in brightness, but it's like this. So if you look at the Christmas tree again, right, it was like going slower and slower and slower. So just now at stage 2, right, the K complex is like there's a sudden bright flash. But now it's like what? Slower, and then suddenly it becomes significantly brighter, and the speed of changing bright and dim, it goes faster too. So that's the stage 3 where we're looking at this part, the so-called delta activity. So it's like this, normally slowing down, and suddenly it has, so it's brighter, dimmer, and it goes faster. But it's not like a sudden explosion of light. Now, from here on, it's very difficult to explain what really happens because it's no longer just like synchronized activity. Because the entire brain is already quite synchronized already. So we still haven't been able to explain all this, but we noticed the differences and we labeled it. All right? So if you look at this, right, basically it goes like this. When you are awake, and you are very much conscious, awake, doing something, maybe let's say you are doing your psychology exam, and you are thinking, this is a big clown, never give hint properly, all these thoughts come, right? Then this is very active, it's called theta wave. As you try to calm yourself down into sleep, it becomes alpha wave. How fast are these? Usually, beta activity can be somewhere between about anywhere from 12-15 cycles per second all the way to about 30-50 cycles per second. That means if you look at overall bright dim, one brightness, one dim is one count. So it goes like maybe say 30 times per second. Okay? Now, if you are not doing, let's say, your psychology exam, you're doing something even tougher. Maybe you're doing advanced mathematics exam and you are doing a 3-hour paper in 2 hours. So now you have to think very fast. This thing can go all the way up to what? 70, 80 cycles per second. That is a lot of brain activity. I mean, I can't ask you to imagine it and then have you appreciate how fast it is. Okay? I can only describe the numbers, which hopefully gives you some sense. If not, then you go and pick up a 10-year series on FMATs. All right? Then you can do quickly. That's the same feeling. Okay? Now, when it slows down, so when some of you might have heard before, hey, alpha stage, the stage where I can have superpower, right? Somewhere on the internet, they have all this funny shit, where they tell you, if you try to train yourself to have alpha state, you can become a superhuman. All this bullshit. There's nothing unique about alpha state. It's just a slower wave activity. But the few things is that this is somewhere where you transit between your full awareness into sleep. So you might be able to make use of two functions, both the awake functions and the sleep functions. So that's why it's like, wow, you become what? Supernatural, super normal, Superman. It's no big deal. You are just using more features than you usually use. And can people be trained to do features even when they are awake? Yes. So it's nothing superhuman. It's just a matter of getting used to getting more out of your brain. All right? Now, it is true that when people are in alpha state, they tend to be able to concentrate better. That is because they are trying to calm themselves down so they don't have so much anxiety kind of arousal. So all those internet things ask you to buy, wow, there's this program, get you into alpha state, then you become superhuman, you are so much calmer. Duh. You need to calm yourself down before you go to sleep, right? So if you stay somewhere around there, you'll be pretty calm. No big deal. You don't have to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to buy this kind of program. Okay, got it? How to train? It's beyond the syllabus here, but if you are in some other classes where they teach you all these mindfulness exercises, that is one sure way you can learn to calm yourself down. Then of course you say that, but feedback is useful. Very simple. Go look for some app, all right, and see if you can convert your cell phone into something that can measure some brain. Usually it's not accurate, by the way, so it will just be a waste of money. But there are ways where they download app, and then after that you can try and measure your brain wave, so you have some feedback that, oh wow, my exercise is useful, I'm calming down. Okay. So because the only sharp thing is you really need some kind of instrument where you put electrodes on your forehead and then they tap into the brain activity. All right. So these are all the things that are out there. But the mindfulness exercises, yeah, you can get, I think it's called Headspace. One of the app is the very famous, popular app is called Headspace. So they have this commentary that helps you relax and train your mindfulness thinking. So that can allow you to either master alpha stage without knowing, or it allows you to simulate that kind of level. All right. Okay. So you see, I'm not leaving you with just theory and then you feel so helpless. Oh, why I cannot be superhuman? You can. Headspace. Okay. And by the way, I don't get a commission from them, so there is no vested interest here. All right. Now let's move on. Now I'm going to sum up. I don't need you to memorize all the things. So far, all I'm trying to impart across is that brain activity level is supposed to slow down, as you can see from where I've listed. But it is wrong to think that brain activity will consistently slow down. There are times when there is an explosion of activity. This implies that the brain is undergoing a lot of different activities. That's why they have to adjust with varying levels of activity. Now we are interested in what is happening. Like, is there some kind of underlying behavior when we sleep? So if you find that just now the picture, right, too messy, even the enlarged side on the right side is messy, here you can read about the descriptions. The next slide. And up to this point, I'd like you to put a star here. Do I need you to memorize? No, I don't need you to memorize. I need you to know that there are 4 non-REM stages. So your eye will not dart all over your eye socket when you are in these 4 stages. For some people, they actually find rapid eye movement very scary. It's almost like some kind of zombie show where the person shows the eye move very fast and after they turn to a zombie. All right? So people get scared because it's unnatural. When you look at it, right, a lot of people first time seeing the REM movement, they will say, "Ew, why like that?" Then they either feel that, wow, so interesting, or they feel, oh my God, it looks close. Very standard one. So we are looking at the non-REM sleep, all right? So these are the ones. It's also known as slow wave sleep. So you are already in sleep, your waves are considered slow. It's these 4 stages. Got it? Okay? Now, I would like you to, if you have hard copy, you should underline the words such as what? Sleep spindles. Stage 2, there's sleep spindle. Then you go to just now that slide, right? This one. And it's highlighted for you. Look at the right side. The left side, I put it there to show you how they progress. I mean, if I use my mouse to show you, on this side, I listed all the patterns so you can see how they move. Then over at this side, right, I enlarge it so that you can see these are the things that we are looking at. All right, maybe you just put a star at spindles, complex, okay, complexes. At least be able to distinguish. One is the fast-moving type. The other is the camera flashlight burst. Like once on, off, big burst, then over. So do you now remember which stage gives you spindles and complexes? It is under the entire class of non-REM, but which stage? So stage 2, okay? All right, I think that should be enough to exercise your bragging rights to others. You don't really need so much of it. Okay, let's move on. What happens when we have REM sleep? And these are some of the features associated with it. First of all, if you can literally, some parents actually do that, although I'm not encouraging you to do so. Some parents, right, they literally, when their little infants are asleep, it happens once you are babies, and as you grow, it will always happen. They pull over the eyelid and see, oh, look, it's nothing. Okay? So they know their infants are normal. All right? So, yeah, if you do it, don't quote me, okay? I literally saw that happening before. But anyway, back to here. So it's literally very fast eye movement. Most of the time you see it as what? It doesn't roll that much, it's darting. Most of the time it's left-right kind of movement. And if you wake the person up during this stage, you ask and of course you can't do this to an infant, they won't be able to describe. But if you wake a child, an adult, during the REM movement, they will report some form of a dream. Like I said, about 80-90% of the time, closer to 90. And sometimes, right, we find it very strange. Just now you remember the one type of wave is called the theta waves. Okay, never mind what it is. If you don't remember later, you just flip and take a look. You need this? Yeah, I finish this slide first, then I will answer the question. Now, what is this thing called paradoxical sleep? It's when you are supposed to be asleep, yet, right, your brain, just now you watched the video said, and suddenly you are into some activity, and very large activity some more. So we would expect you to wake up, but no, you don't wake up. You are just blocked from activity. So when they measure the muscle tone of people, they find that there is no signal reaching the muscles, and therefore the muscles will not tense up, no movement. Okay? All right, so there are some questions. What about sleepwalking? What about bedwetting? What about the effect of lighting affects sleep? I will talk about all this later. All right, they all have effect on us. So let's finish up with the entire overview of sleep first. Let's take stock. All right. I mean, we are a bit short of time, so that's why I didn't break you up into class activity and discuss, and then you feel more awake instead of wanting to sleep. All right. But then let's take stock so that you're clearer. We are now looking at sleep behavior. So behavior is part of psychology, right? But you can't run away talking about the neurological patterns behind this behavior. And first classification is that sleep has a non-rapid eye movement stage and a rapid eye movement stage. So generally for adults, we need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night, and you will display these two stages. Furthermore, you learn that non-REM part, or known as slow wave sleep, has how many stages? 4 stages. Then there is also the REM stage, right? So total how many stages actually? 5. So don't become confused. Some people tell you, 5 stage, 4 stage, but they are really referring to 4 slow wave stage and the 1 active one, add together 5 stages. When you sleep, then we also learn that the behavior is never acted out when we are asleep. Lay people's understanding is because there's no activity. Then sometimes they explain, because you're unconscious. Unconsciousness simply means you have no awareness of what's going on. But really, some people remember their dreams, right? So are you totally unconscious? Not really. You are really in an altered state of consciousness. But people don't buy this term because it's too lengthy, it's too technical. The real thing is actually sleep is just an altered state of consciousness. It's not like you are totally unconscious. Secondly, this stage, it's not that you have no activity, it's just that all your brain, right, all the way up to, so if this is your brain, and the signals are all up to around this part, so if you measure above this, okay, this is my neck, this is the base of my skull, all right? If you measure activity up to this level, this point here, it's full of activity up there. But then in the brainstem, there's actually a part that shoots something and blocks the signal from here down. Except emergency or regulatory kind of movement, like you are crushing one arm, so you turn. Okay? That's what we've covered so far about the behavior of sleep. Now I'd like you to see it in its entirety, because those are the components we talk about. If you put it into a big picture, it looks like that. In other words, it appears in cycles. Notice? So suppose someone goes to sleep at night at 11 p.m. It takes about 1.5 hours to finish from stage 1, 2, 3, 4 and REM. Then it will repeat itself. 1, 2, 3, 4, REM. Again. You will have about 4 to 6 of these cycles every night for a 7 to 8 hour sleep. Why 4 to 6? It depends on how tired you are, how sleep deprived you are, and generally your genetics behind sleep. Okay? So
How does genetics affect this, the sleep?
genetics means the genetics will make sure that we all need to sleep, but it will also determine to a certain extent, right, how long you spend in REM. All right. So if you have longer REMs, it will then take up time from your non-REM. But it doesn't have too much variation. You find that it's usually if finally they learn how to relax, learn how to sleep, okay, it's always still about 5-6 cycles a night. It's actually rarer to see people going only through 4 cycles. Now, we will talk about why the cycles get more or less late just shortly. Okay? Now, put a star in this slide. You know now that you have about 4 to 6 cycles, mostly 5-6. And the other thing I want to highlight is, take a look at here, the mouse. The first 2 or 3 cycles are very clear cut. It's always, it's always 1, 2, 3, 4, and then after that it will shoot very quickly up. So you notice that this portion, right, it goes back 3, 2, 1, but actually this part, right, it can be over in just 1 or 2 minutes. So it's like initially it takes 10 minutes here, then from wakefulness to stage 1, it's not even 10 minutes, it's usually about 5 to 10 minutes. Then 1 to 2, right, it takes about 10-20 minutes to clear. Then the remaining from 2 to 4, it can take somewhere between 30 minutes to 60 minutes to pan out. So it stretches longer and longer, isn't it? Then after, once it's ready, it turns off the stage 4, it will suddenly within 1 to 5 minutes, it will shoot all the way back to wakefulness. Except you don't wake up. You just suddenly go into a lot of random eye movement. But the person is clearly asleep. And it will be like this for about 10-15 minutes. The first cycle, you will only have about 10-15 minutes of REM. Then, the next time it begins, it will go into 1, 2, 3, 4 again. For some people, you find that their 1 and 2 becomes very indistinguishable. But generally, quite a number of people, it's 50-50. You still see. So the first 2 cycles are very clear. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, shoot up to REM, and 1, 2, 3, 4, shoot up to REM. But as you progress through the night, right, you will find that for the first 5 hours of sleep, so minus the first cycle, that's first 1 to 1.5 hours, and second cycle, so total you have for 5 hours of sleep. Look here, it's easier to see. It's for 5 hours of sleep, there's 1.5 hours gone, another about 1.5 hours gone. So that leaves how many? 2 hours left, right? So during these last 2 hours, before you hit the 5-hour mark, there is a lot more stages 3 and 4. Not so much in 1 and 2. So if you measure, right, you find that the brain waves, they skip past 1 and 2 very quickly and go into 3 and 4. And later on, we found out that this 3 and 4 is when your body adjusts to physical healing. If you have rheumatoid pains, it will be worse if you skip this portion. So people who always have lack of sleep, and they sleep 2-3 hours, then they wake up, then they stay awake for a long time, then they go back to sleep, and then they sleep 2-3 hours, and they wake up again. These people have a lot of joint aches, and if they have rheumatoid pains, it's usually worse off. All right, plus their immunity is usually lower too. Okay, you measure their amount of inflammation in their body, it's higher. Okay, I cannot go into details about inflammation. There's plenty of things there. Which means the person's behavior is going to be disrupted. Think about it. If you have a lot of muscle aches, joint pains, would you do a lot more exercise? Would you select to play video games, or would you select to go play badminton? Already, your sleep is influencing the way you participate in life. So then people ask, how do we get that kind of sleep? It depends. For some people, they worry a lot about things. Or they automatically want to think of things, what am I going to do tomorrow? So this type of people, mindfulness exercise, the detachment type of mindfulness exercise would be helpful. So before they fall asleep, right, we ask them to just experience your breathing, in, out. Don't count. All right, there are counting type of mindfulness, there are non-counting type. So this type are the non-counting type. They just breathe in and breathe out, feeling the air move through their nose, but never focusing on any thought. For example, let's say I'm lying in bed and I'm feeling, oh yeah, got air, slowly lah. You don't, oh, got air, right? Then you won't sleep, or you won't knock out. But if you slowly, okay, just normally, okay, got air in or air out, air in, air out, and then suddenly a thought comes. Suddenly you think, oh yeah, shucks, tomorrow's report, I haven't even wrote the outline. I forgot about it. Oh my God. And the moment you catch yourself, so you will ramble a bit, then suddenly you realize, hey, wait, that is a thought about work tomorrow. Can I do anything about it now? Never mind, tomorrow. Then you put it aside, I will deal with it tomorrow. I go back, oh, got in, out. Initially, it's tough. Some people still worry. But if you do this over a period of about 2 to 4 weeks, you find that you now have some mastery over the calmness. Invading thoughts can be labeled and shelved aside. So this type of mindfulness are called detachment type of mindfulness exercise. These are good for people who like to think a lot. So some people ask you to count, right? That's why there's the counting sheep thing. Then after the sheep runs everywhere, then cannot count, lost count. That is useful for another type of people. Okay, I don't have enough time to go into details of this. So you just learn one thing, okay? That if you tend to worry a lot, think a lot, you do the experience, the sensation, don't count. Any thoughts that come, once you realize it, label it, don't analyze, just label, park it aside, and go back to feeling that. Very soon you drift off into sleep. Your body will resist this for the first few days to maybe up to about 3-4 weeks. So you might find that why I do this, I get even worse. It's normal. But once your body decided that, okay, I don't want to resist anymore, you usually will drift off into sleep within about 20 minutes. If you are sleep deprived, it will be even faster. Okay? So why this? Because you want to hit the 3 to 5 hour mark. All right? The calmer you are, the more likely you will hit that without any disruption. Except if you have a lot of things going on in the day and you end up having nightmares, you wake up. So this will allow you to engage in more activities. If you have all the 3 to 5 hour, your body repairs a lot. And for ladies, right, just remember, if you miss your 3 to 5 hours, your skin won't look that beautiful. Yeah, skin repair, 80% during sleep. 20% when you're awake. Now you know, just putting the Lancome on, not enough. All right? It's called sleep. That brand better. Okay, enough. I think I digress too much. There are a lot more things. Okay? All right, now. Last part is this. What about from after 5th hour to about 7-8 hours? During that time, you will find that it's a lot more on REM. So earlier on, watch my mouse. Earlier on, there are REMs, but they are usually short-lasting. Anything from 15 minutes to 30 minutes, sometimes about maybe 1.5. But once we pass the 5 hour mark, right, the REM sleep will increase by a lot. In fact, they may even take up the whole of your stretch so that there is no more 3 and 4. Meaning your all this physical healing, right, really slows down a lot. So if you don't get a good 5 hours sleep minimum, you will immediately notice the next day you get lots of joint aches. Don't believe you can go and experiment. You put alarm clock, you sleep for just 4 hours. 1 or 2 nights, you will start to feel, why my joint feels so sore? Yeah, it's because your body actually never fully repairs itself. And it's not only not fully repaired, it secretes more inflammation to disrupt the blood flow too. Okay? And all your activity, muscle activity, the lactic acid, it doesn't clear. So you have a lot of soreness, pains. But don't experiment this for too long, it's bad for your health. Then after that, it has very lengthy REM sleep. Okay, what does REM sleep do? Last time we used to think that it's no big deal, it's just dreams. Now we are of a different opinion. We realize that there are 2 kinds of dreams going on. Okay, if you believe in supernatural, maybe got 3 types of dreams, right? The other dream, you go heaven, go hell. We don't know about that. For our scientists, we only know 2 types of dreams. One is random dream, meaning your brain activity has a random part, so it conjures up images. These are the rarer occurring things. More often, right, you actually have dreams about your entire day's experience. Although the story can be warped a little bit. All right, but you generally still experience the everything you have learned throughout the day. And this exception is much faster. So if you take 10 hours to go through, let's say you learn a new thing, and you are very, very hardworking at it. You are trying to learn how to maybe say play inline skates. All right, so you play inline skate. During this period of time, at about around here, all the scenes, all the theories that you recall doing your inline skate, they are fast forwarded by about 10 times. So you are like rehearsing at a super duper fast rate. Okay? Now this tells you something. What should you do when you are revising for your psychology exam? Don't forget to sleep. Right? Last time your parents, your teachers never tell you, right? They did. They tell you don't burn the midnight oil, but they don't know how to explain. The reason is because you are still studying when you are asleep. But you need to put the information in. You don't happily, never mind, now I go to sleep. Then you never even learn anything, you go to sleep, right? Then you still learn nothing, okay? So, learn, can go to sleep. When you are sleeping, it's actually, that's why some of you might have noticed that when you learn something, right, after you've learned a big chunk of it, it's like, I'm getting clumsy, or I'm not very used to the info anymore. But after 1 or 2 nights of sleep, somehow, and if you didn't revise, right, of course you will remember, you will forget some of it. But if you still revise the same thing, so you learn, let's say A to Z, and you only learn A to Z, you don't go beyond for 2 days, and you do a little bit of revision when you wake, and you find that after 2 days, somehow it has sunken in very well. Have that kind of experience before? And suddenly you feel like, hey, I think I can make use of the info pretty well. But it's only true if you revise a bit when you wake so that you don't forget. Because if you're 24 hours, you never practice anything new, factual information. So you memorize whatever it is now, then you don't touch it for 24 hours. There is cognitive decay going on. It's trying to get rid of all those unwanted information. You probably remember 30%, around there, average. But if you revise a bit, right, so you're telling the brain, don't forget, I need this one. Then what you will do is, during sleep time, it will also rehearse for you. Then you will find that, hey, I'm now better at it. Even though you find that I only did a bit of revision, but first day I did a lot. Then after revision, how come still a lot? During your sleep, you go through all this. Okay? So, make full use of your sleep, all right? Sleep is not a waste. So REM helps with remembering information. Non-REM helps with healing. These two together will influence the way you behave, even when you are awake. The reason why people don't get enough sleep, other than actually most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, is because they are taking on too many tasks, or they fail to plan to do those tasks. If it's not over too much tasks, they fail to plan the time to do the task properly. So they end up losing, they have to stay awake longer, and then they lose the sleep. If you plan nicely, you should be able to finish those whatever tasks and then sleep. Or else, if there's too much tasks, it's not urgent, you can just forget about it for a moment. All right? So then you are leveraging on this. So once upon a time, now again, not so important, once upon a time, even Freud also talked about it. To him, he said that it's just a matter of trying to go through what you desire in life. But some things are unacceptable. Like maybe someone is a kinky person. They're always trying to think of some perverted sex. But you can't really do these kind of things when, conveniently. So, according to Freud, when you sleep, you dream of all this lewd content. That's why these things are latent. They are sleeping content. They only surface in your dream. But of course, we know Freud was doing the usual fraudulent stuff. Okay? So ignore that part if you read in the internet. Then later on, right, biologists came and said that, dream is just some kind of you become more active and you cognitive reorganization, you learn more things. But apparently, it is quite correct. now we have evidence that you repeat some of the things you learn, and it's much faster to sleep instead of not sleep and just learn things. And this is especially true for motor kind of learning. Factual learning, right? You try to memorize some facts about your exam, it's not the best type of info. If you are trying to, let's say, learn how to play tennis, learn how to play inline skates, tools, manipulation. So these are very motor. You have to movement on. You really must sleep. During the REM stage, right? Motor memories are super duper packed and reorganized and embedded, coded more deeply than your factual declarative kind of information. Okay? Question? And of course, then later on we have people who talk about rehearsing. So these two, they are what we know today. They are true. You either rehearse all the info, or some of it are actually just random images. But this part is actually lesser. Most of the time, there's a lot of cognitive reorganization going on. Okay? And these are the people who talk about, this is the guy who tried to play fraud, all right? Okay, let me move on. I have actually explained all this. Notice? All right? So survival hinges upon sleep. It is true that some people don't need so much sleep, but naturally speaking, very rare. Because humans, we have much better evolved brain. We can train ourselves to forego sleep at the expense of optimal thinking ability. So, and if you try to block REM sleep, right? So let's say you put the person on EEG, and then you put electrodes on the person. So every time the person goes into REM sleep, you wake the person up. The following day, so they have all the non-REM, but they don't have any REM sleep. The next day, the person would almost be unable to concentrate. Of course, they are very tired, but you find that comparing between their just tired, not just people who are just tired, same level of tiredness, the people who lost the people who lost the REM sleep, they also have multiple times of deficiency in terms of paying attention, in terms of concentrating on things. So if let's say Charlene and I, right, let's say we feel equally tired. You measure us, we are like equally tired. But I was the one who was like deprived of REM sleep. Then you talk to her, you tell her, hey, my handphone number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you tell me the same thing. She might feel tired and she's able to track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then after 1 hour, she's able to remember. Of course, we'll talk about some random numbers. Okay, this is serial number, so of course you remember. Just pretend it's a random number. But for me, right, if after you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right, I may actually then ask, what is it that you say? Then you repeat again. Then I say, oh, okay, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Right? Okay? What is that? I will have this kind of performance already. And then 1 hour later, she will dial your number. Oi, time to go home. 10:05 already, no. But shucks, I can't even remember your number. Now I cannot tell you to go home. So we just have to plow on for another 5 more minutes. Got it? That is the problem of sleep deprivation. If you hit the REM sleep, you won't be able to stay alert. You can stay awake, you cannot stay alert. And if you do this doesn't matter which part of the sleep, right? If you continuously go mess up sleep, you will eventually suffer from mood problems to body metabolic issues. There is no problem if you stay sleep deprived for about 24, 48 hours. All right. I know down here it says up to 24 hours, but this is like, they are very high standard. They want to measure and make sure that there is nothing wrong at all. But usually about 1 day, 2 days, you will not only have, from 24 hours onwards, you may have a bit of like slowness, but it's not significant. You generally can still work. 3rd day onwards, right, you can work general things, no problem. But emergency kind of work, may be a bit difficult. You will lose focus, or you might find that your strength is not there. If you are doing, like, let's say, firefighting. So unfortunately, some of these emergency personnel, they have to stop for longer periods of time. Or maybe it's during wartime, like now some Ukrainians are overworking. It's unfortunate, but that's how the body works. People's performance will become suboptimal. Okay? So don't stay sleep deprived for too long. Here, hallucinations can occur if you stay awake for more than 5 days for humans, and eventually death. All right? There will be some form of multiple organ failure and suddenly when death sets in. But this is only true if there is no sleep in between. If let's say you are deprived of sleep right before you die, and suppose you are like already a few days without sleep, and you sleep once, maybe you will still feel tired, but if you sleep, let's say 8 to 10 hours, your body is okay again. But you will feel tired. You need about another 2 to 4 days of proper sleep before you feel normal. So sleep deprivation has its impact. After that, you feel tired, you still cannot function. Subjectively, you are still off. Okay? So let's think about it. Sleep is a major thing. It is a behavior we must have. When we don't have, it will compromise us on our daily activity. Furthermore, our health will also become compromised. Plus, we are already influenced to behave in a different way. Like there's more aches and pains. You can't join friends for outdoor activities easily. And you might even think that it's your choice. I'm a more sedentary person. I don't want to go participate in certain activities. You think it's your choice, but actually it's because deep down, right, it's already telling you cannot. It's the same with the food thing I showed you, right? You eat carbs food, within 2 hours, your decision is going to become a more impulsive one. So here we have sleep doing the same thing. Now, some people ask me, what about bedwetting, like peeing in bed? Peeing in bed will happen when we are younger because the inhibitory process is not specific enough. As we grow older, we are not supposed to wet our bed. But some people do end up wetting their beds, all right? This thing can be trained away. So what happens is there is actually a device where people are strapped on. So when the bladder is about to be full, or another device is they wear some kind of diapers, where it detects a bit of wetness only, right? The alarm clock will go off, waking the person. So the person now goes to the toilet to void. Now do this a few nights, then they start to learn how to control. The body understands the signal and they will stop their bedwetting. If it doesn't stop, it means the person usually have something that they are worrying over too much. It's stopping the body from learning the new signals. Okay? Another question is, what about people with sleepwalking? Actually, sleepwalking is not about dreaming. Sleepwalking usually happens at about stage 3 and stage 4, that kind of timing. All right? So it's actually in your non-REM. You don't dream. What is happening is the brainstem, right, part of the brainstem portion, it no longer inhibits the movement part. So the person just wake up and start to move around. But they are usually moving around randomly. It's not that they have some kind of dream. However, if they have a lot of things to worry, then you find that they will somehow act out very similar. Because why? Remember, the brain is actually relearning information when you sleep. So it is actually acting out because of the learning process, not because you are dreaming. Okay? Now, then the last part, new parents are superhumans. Well, I guess so, because they have to take care of their infants. Now, over here is a list of other things. I think insomnia, you know, all right? And then there are people with sleep problems, such as this too, where they feel very, very tired throughout the day. No matter how they sleep, they still feel very tired, to the point where in cataplexy, they can be awake and suddenly just fall asleep. Now, why that happens? These two are neurological problems. Okay, we will end in less than 5 minutes. Like the person, right? When you sleep, different parts of your brain must come in and tell yourself to sleep. But the problem is, and one part is to then inhibit your muscle so that you don't move. But now the problem is that part that inhibits the muscle it goes haywire. Even before you sleep, right, it starts to inhibit the muscle, so the person just flop on the floor. Will they do that? Not necessary, because there are two things. Most of the time, we realize that people with cataplexy, it comes on because they get too emotional or too excited about things. So behaviorally, right, they are taught how to keep calm, how not to over-engage themselves. If they are participating in some sports like playing badminton, they learn to regulate their excitement. Win, good, laugh a bit. Don't yay, fall asleep. All right? So they learn how to regulate themselves. Sleep apnea is simply what? Blockage of breathing during sleep. There are two types. One is because the person, usually obese people have more of these problems because their control of the musculature here is no good, or the tongue is no good, so it roll back and block. But for normal people who have nothing wrong, so I think less than 10% of sleep apnea is because the nervous system actually shuts down. So meaning, right, they just stop breathing because the nervous system decided that no need to breathe anymore. Yeah. But will they be like that forever? No. After a while, right, the emergency system will kick in. To stay alive, they will suddenly be shocked into wakefulness. But that means these people have disrupted sleep. So this will require medication. So psychology cannot help with these people except to let them know that they are afflicted with such neurological conditions. Stay calm, go take medication. Okay? The blockage one, then of course various things can be done. Sometimes it's just training of the muscles. Sometimes it's surgical procedure. Okay? All right. Night terror is a type of sleepwalking, except the person doesn't come out to walk. And it usually happens to kids. As they grow up, they will get rid of night terror. But this is really a terror. The child will suddenly wake up. Most of the time, they won't just open their eyes. They will wake up and sit in bed. And then they would have already have broken down in cold sweat, and they will scream very loudly. So loud that you think that they are being murdered. But then the parents will be very, I was about to say kanchong. The parents will be very afraid, very nervous, and then they will run. All right? They run and then look at their child, but the child will just be staring blankly. Maybe by then, as they get there, a few seconds later, the scream is gone. But they look like they are awake, eyes open, very wide, stare into blank space, and profusely sweating. But if you wake the child up at the time, right, the child wouldn't have any dreams, and they don't report any dreams. And also, if you ask the child the next day, right, because the child is like unconsciously but with eyes open. So after that, you next day you ask, what bad dream did you have? They have no idea. They don't even know that they actually set out. So the best thing is, of course, night terror happens. The parents, if they are concerned, they come to the room, sit beside the child. All right, you can hold the child lightly and wait for the episode to be over, then slowly tuck the child back to sleep. Nothing to it on. This neurological problem, they will grow out of it as they grow. For those that does not, of course, you need to go see a neurologist for it. Neurologist specializing in sleep. And the other thing is this sleep terror. Okay, there are ways also to help these people psychologically speaking. So usually parents will look at the time of onset. So maybe it's somewhere between 2 to 4. So we will catch the earliest time, let's say 2 o'clock. So they observe for 2 weeks, earliest time is 2 o'clock. So what they will do is at 1:30 they will rouse the child. The child will be very sleepy, wake up. And then after that, right, just pamper the child a bit, okay, calmly speak to the child, have the child go back to sleep. You find that by interrupting their sleep-wake cycle, after about 1 week to about a month, the sleep terror will just resolve by itself. We have no idea why it's working, we just know that it's working. We believe that the disruption actually forced the brain to reorganize itself, but we don't really have solid proof about it. Last part is people who sleep, they sometimes jerk. It's not the same as, sometimes you sleep, you feel like, I'm going to fall asleep, or you shock, wake up, right? You are actually too tired. For that kind of situation, you are so tired, your muscle is relaxing too quickly, but as it relaxes too quickly, it mimics the sensation of you dropping off a cliff, that kind of thing. So you jerk yourself up. If you do less work or you rest more often, you find that this thing will become lesser or it might just go away. The periodic limb movement disorder is different. That is not tiredness. That is because neurologically they have something wrong. So they start to, if they sleep, right, say halfway they start to do this. And for many, many minutes. And they try to stop, but cannot stop. But the psychological thing can make it worse. Like the people who go into this job, right? I have one patient, he believes that he was disturbed by ghosts. He called those dirty things. Then he thought that, dirty things, so I just go to a place dirtier than them. So whenever he got jerked, right, he will drag himself, right, limp a bit, go to the toilet, and then just sit there or sit on the toilet bowl, because the toilet is supposed to be a dirty place. Then he believes that the things will leave him alone. After he comes down a bit, he can go back to sleep. Okay, but it's really a neurological problem. You take some medication, you will suppress. So sleep has normal behavior and abnormal behavior. I wish you good sleep, good night.
How about those people like they have experience before sleep and then you actually awake but your body is unawake?
That we call hypnagogic hallucination. So there are two types of special kind of hallucination. One is when you fall asleep, what happened is your wave, right, is not slowing down fast enough, but the paralysis actually kicks in first. Or when you're awake, right, the paralysis is slow to turn off. So your consciousness comes back and then you feel it. So either you get locked in for a while, and for some people during the lock-in, right, the brain becomes, because it's going faster than the paralysis part. So it becomes too active, they start to see hallucination. But the hallucinations are unlike those schizophrenia. Where schizophrenia can be they literally talk to a friend who's not there. This kind of hallucination, they usually see flashes of light or geometrical figures running across their vision. Even when their eyes are closed, they see all these bright figures going around. So that is actually the wave is not in synchrony with the paralysis part. That's why it occurs.
What about like when you go under GA? That's not sleep, that is just a chemical in your brain.
The chemical is suppressing you. By right, the GA is supposed to be strong enough to knock out every part of your consciousness. But again, like I said, genetics does count. Some people, they are wired a bit differently. So the GA knocks out all it does the same thing as the inhibition part, but it fails to knock out the consciousness part. There are at least 3 portions involved in keeping you conscious, 3 major portions. Let's call it ABC. So the GA is supposed to go in and knock out also all these ABC, but if it doesn't, then you start to wake up earlier. Then you can happily watch your own surgery in progress. But the surgeon will ask you, the anesthesiologist will ask you to put back, but you can tell them, no need lah. Or maybe I'll just fall asleep later. Right?
Yeah, actually happened once. I was in the operating theater, I wake up. But I remember asking, who are your guys? Then after that, I fall back to sleep again. Then the doctor actually told me that you actually woke up.
But were you aware that you woke up?
I can remember that I'm seeing them. Then I just woke
But you
up.
notice from his account, he wasn't fully conscious because the GA is still in effect. That's why he said, who are you guys? He forgot that he was undergoing surgery. So the GA is working to a large extent already.
How about the wake up and try to without eating?
If you have intermittent insomnia, so it's like you sleep, wake, sleep, wake, sleep, wake. Those times that you wake up, you can try mindfulness also. Detachment mindfulness. That is the first line we do. After that, we still have to look at the details of the person and adjust something that will work. Okay? So, here is not therapy session now. I can only give you general suggestion. Try out, go ask, I don't know, maybe Charlene. Some of the stuff here, there is a module on all this mindfulness thing. So down there, they will teach you some of the mindfulness techniques, and these are applicable for intermittent awakenings in the night. Okay, if you have nightmares, then it's different. It could be you are worrying over something, then you need to resolve it in your daily living. Okay, yeah. That's it. Good luck. I will send you all I think I wanted to do revision, but then it seems like the question is not ending yet. Hang on. I will email your mock paper. Do that, then check the answer. So you will feel, you can see the structure and you will get a hang of it. That's what the MCQ is about. All right. One more question. Tips. I already asked you all to put stars. If you forget, then it's not my fault.
Some of the students were saying the videos on Dropbox is only until lecture 4.
Yeah, like I mentioned just now, I will upload the today's one too. There is no, I think Was it this lesson? Oh no, that's the other lesson. Yeah, the I've taken now some, and then that was the first batch, then the second batch is up. So the second batch will be removed, and then the latest one will be uploaded. I already removed, okay. Sorry, I have three classes that are sharing all these video resources. So, but the thing is, I remember every class will have at least 2-3 weeks to download, then the next batch will be uploaded, okay? So you check, the remaining videos will be given to you all. You don't need to memorize the videos for the exam. It's just to help you understand things, and that's it, okay?
And then how about the essay? Anything to look out for, like
anything to look out for? Essay?
We look at the whole video. So you were saying that looking at one segment,
yeah,
bring up and talk about it.
Yeah, as we discussed in the lesson 1, you only need to watch. I mean, you watch once through first, then think of which part I actually like. Then you go and rewatch that part. So you just need to watch one time plus a bit, and then after that, just focus on that segment that you want to write about. That's it. Okay. Bye bye. Sleep well. There is no Janet. There is no for sure number of references needed for the video essay, because it depends on what you're going to argue about. Most of them, putting in about 8 to 10 references would have scored almost, if not full marks for that section on references. But then your references, it should be those what we call peer reviewed. That means from reliable sources. Okay, maybe scientific journals. All right, it should not be some like newspaper clippings. So that one not so robust. Okay. Okay. Any more questions?